She came back alone. No explanations, no reports, just silence and a wooden chess piece that would bring down an empire. Because sometimes the smallest pieces on the board can change everything. This is the story of Commander Maya Chun, and the day humanity's deadliest secret was finally revealed. The arrival the docking bay of Station Nexus 7 fell silent as the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge slid into port 3 weeks ahead of schedule. No fanfare greeted its arrival. No celebration lights flickered across the metal walls. Even the usual chatter of dock workers died to whispers as they watched the ship settle with mechanical precision into its berth. Commander Maya Chin stepped through the airlock alone. The waiting delegation of Galactic Council members exchanged glances. Where was the rest of the cultural exchange team? Where were the 8 Zephyrian diplomats who had volunteered for the groundbreaking mission to study Earth's primitive human civilization? Maya walked past them without a word. Her uniform was wrinkled, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the regulation military bun. Most unsettling of all, she carried something in her left hand, a small wooden object that she turned over and over between her fingers with absent-minded familiarity. Commander Chun called out Counselor Varix, his blue-scaled face creased with concern. "We need your immediate report on the Earth mission." Maya paused mid-step. For a moment, she looked like she might speak. Instead, she simply shook her head and continued walking toward the residential quarters. "Commander, this is highly irregular," Varix pressed, following her. "The full council is waiting. Where is your team?" Maya stopped. She turned to face the counselor, and for the first time he saw her eyes clearly. They held something he had never seen in a Zephyrian before, a deep, quiet sadness mixed with what could only be described as wonder. "They're home," she said softly, then walked away. "The investigation begins, Dar." Crix had seen many cases of mission trauma in his 40 years as a xenopsychologist, but nothing quite like this. He studied the woman sitting across from him in the sterile white room, noting every detail of her behavior. Maya Chun sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, except for the occasional movement of her thumb against that wooden object. She had not let go of it since her return. The medical scanners had identified it as carved from Earth oak, a simple chess piece, specifically a pawn. "Maya," Dr. Crix said gently, using her first name in hopes of establishing rapport. "You've been back for 3 days. The council is concerned about your team. Can you tell me anything about what happened?" Maya's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Do you play chess, Doctor?" "I'm familiar with many games from various cultures. Chess is a human strategic game, correct?" "It's more than a game," Maya said, her voice distant. "It's a philosophy, a way of thinking about sacrifice, about protecting what matters, about seeing moves ahead that others can't imagine." Dr. Crix made notes on his tablet. "This is what you learned about human culture? They're games." Maya laughed, a sound so unexpected that Dr. Crix nearly dropped a stylus. "They're games," she repeated. "Doctor, you have no idea what we were dealing with." "Then help me understand. Where's your team?" Maya's expression shifted, becoming guarded again. "I told the counselor. They're home. But their home is Zephyr Prime. The mission was only supposed to last 30 days. Maya finished. "I know. I was there." Dr. Crix leaned forward. "Maya, according to your ship's logs, you were on Earth for exactly 30 days. But you returned alone. What happened to the others?" Maya stood and walked to the small window that looked out over the station's central hub. Aliens of dozens of species moved through the corridors below, each following their predetermined paths, their regulated schedules, their assigned roles. "Have you ever wondered, Doctor, why the Galactic Council chose Zephyrians for this mission? Your species has always been excellent diplomats, logical, disciplined, able to observe without emotional interference." "Without emotional interference," Maya repeated. "Yes, that's what they thought." The wooden mystery, the chess piece, became the center of an intense investigation. Scientists from across the galaxy were brought in to study it. They analyzed its molecular structure, searched for hidden technology, even exposed it to various radiation frequencies. It remained stubbornly ordinary, carved wood showing signs of regular handling, with a faint scent that one researcher identified as something between vanilla and earth after rain. Maya watched their efforts with detached amusement. When they finally asked her about it directly, she simply said, "It was a gift." From whom? Press Chief Investigator Zen. "A teacher." "What did this teacher teach you?" Maya picked up the pawn and held it up to the light. That sometimes the smallest piece on the board can change everything. The investigators exchanged frustrated looks. Every conversation with Maya felt like trying to hold water in their hands. Meanwhile, Maya's behavior became increasingly puzzling. She had started humming soft, wordless melodies that didn't match any known Zephyrian music. When asked about it, she said they were lullabies. She had also requested changes to her diet, asking for comfort foods that the station's nutritionists had to research extensively. Apparently, humans consumed something called chicken soup when they were feeling unwell or nostalgic. Most disturbing to the council was her new habit of sitting in the station's observation deck watching the stars. Zephyrians were not particularly contemplative by nature. They were doers, planners, achievers. But Maya would sit for hours, simply looking into space, occasionally moving the chess piece in patterns across her palm. "She's been compromised," declared Counselor Nexus during an emergency session. "Some form of human psychological warfare. We should have never sent our people to such an unpredictable species." "The humans weren't supposed to be a threat," countered Counselor Varix. "Our intelligence indicated they were barely past their industrial age. Primitive societies focused on basic survival and tribal conflicts." "Then explain this." Nexus gestured toward the holographic display showing Maya's psychological profile. "Our top diplomat returned speaking in riddles, carrying trinkets, and humming alien songs. If this isn't evidence of mental contamination, what is?" The failed interrogations, they tried everything. Formal debriefings where Maya sat silent while officials demanded answers. Casual conversations where friendly colleagues attempted to draw her out. They even brought in her sister, Zara, hoping family connections might break through whatever barrier Maya had erected. "Maya, please," Zara pleaded during one session. "You're scaring everyone. What happened to you down there?" Maya looked at her sister with genuine affection. "Nothing happened to me, Zara. Something happened for me." "What does that mean?" "It means I learned something the council isn't ready to hear. Try me." Maya considered this for a long moment. "Do you remember when we were children and you asked me why we couldn't choose our own careers instead of being assigned them?" "Of course. You told me that was how society functioned efficiently. I was wrong." Maya's voice was soft but certain. "I was so incredibly wrong." Zara stared at her sister. "Maya, you're the most dedicated person I know. Your entire life has been about service to the council, to our people. You can't what? Can't change my mind? Can't grow? Can't learn that there might be better ways to live? You're talking about abandoning everything we believe in." Maya held up the chess pawn. "I'm talking about discovering that everything we believe in might be incomplete." The security footage desperate for answers, the investigators turned to the ship's security recordings. What they found only deepened the mystery. The footage showed Maya's team during their final days on the Harmony's edge. They appeared happy, genuinely, inexplicably happy. They laughed together, shared meals, and spoke in hushed, excited tones about their experiences. Several team members had adopted human mannerisms. Gestures, expressions, even ways of sitting that seemed more relaxed than typical Zephyrian posture. But the most disturbing footage was of Maya herself. She was shown standing alone in the ship's observation deck, tears streaming down her face. Zephyrians rarely cried, and when they did, it was typically from physical pain or extreme stress. Maya's tears seemed different somehow, not the tears of distress, but of something else entirely. Enhance Sector 7 ordered investigators in. "What is she looking at?" The screen focused on the viewport. Through it, they could see Earth, a blue and white marble hanging in space, looking deceptively peaceful. "She's looking at Earth," reported the technician. But there's something else. Audio enhancement picks up vocalization. They listened carefully. Maya was speaking, so quietly it was barely audible. The computer's translation protocol struggled with her words, but finally produced, "Forgive me." Forgive her for what? Zen muttered. Nobody had an answer. The growing concern as days passed, Maya's influence began to spread beyond herself. Other station personnel who interacted with her started exhibiting unusual behaviors. A cafeteria worker was caught humming one of Maya's melodies. A maintenance engineer was found sitting and staring at the stars, something completely contrary to his efficiency-focused nature. Most concerning was the effect on the station's children. Zephyrian youth were typically serious, focused on their studies and preparation for their eventual career assignments. But several children had started asking questions, uncomfortable questions about why they couldn't choose their own paths, why they had to follow the same schedules as their parents, why they weren't allowed to play the interesting games they'd heard about. "It's spreading," reported Dr. Crix during his daily briefing. "Whatever happened to Maya on Earth, it's somehow transmissible, not as a virus or pathogen, but as a way of thinking. A way of thinking about what?" asked Counselor Varix. "About possibility, about choice, about the idea that life might be more than just following predetermined roles." The room fell silent. The concept was so foreign to Zephyrian society that it was difficult to even discuss. Dr. Varix said, finally, "Are you suggesting that human culture is some form of psychological weapon?" "I'm suggesting that human culture might be more powerful than we anticipated." Maya's team wasn't captured or killed. They were converted. And now Maya is unconsciously doing the same thing here. Converted to what? Dr. Crix looked at his notes, then at the council members, to the belief that there are other ways to live. The warning signs the situation reached a crisis point when Maya made her first public appearance since returning. She had been invited to address a group of young Zephyrians about interspecies diplomacy, a routine speaking engagement that should have been straightforward. Instead, Maya stood before the assembled students and said, "How many of you have ever wondered what you might be if you could choose for yourself?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Slowly, hesitantly, nearly every hand in the room rose. "That's what I thought," Maya said, her voice gentle but firm. "The humans have a saying, the only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." A student in the front row raised her hand. "Commander, what if we decide to become something that isn't allowed?" Maya smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her since her return. "Then you ask yourself whether the rules that prevent you from becoming who you're meant to be are worth following." The speech was cut short. Maya was escorted from the room by security, but the damage was done. The students left buzzing with excitement and questions that their teachers couldn't answer. That night, as Maya sat in her quarters turning the chess pawn over her hands, she finally spoke to the recording devices she knew were monitoring her. "I know you're listening," she said to the empty room. "And I know you're afraid. You should be. Not because the humans are dangerous, but because they're right. And once you understand that, you can't go back to pretending you don't know." She held up the pawn to the camera. This was carved by a 90-year-old man named Harold. He taught chess to children in a small library in a town called Millbrook. He gave this to me on my last day there, and he said, "Sometimes the smallest piece can protect the king, or it can become the queen. The choice is always yours." Maya set the pawn down on her desk and looked directly into the camera. "My team didn't abandon their mission. They completed it. They learned what we were sent to learn about human culture. The problem is, none of you are ready to hear the truth." The recording ended, leaving the investigators with more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clear. Maya Chun was no longer the same person who had left for 30 days ago, and whatever had changed her was starting to change everyone around her. The real question was whether the Galactic Council could stop it before it spread too far, or whether they would even want to once they understood what they were really trying to stop. The mission unraveled the data recovery 3 weeks after Maya's return. Chief Investigator Zen finally gained access to the complete mission logs from the Harmony's Edge. The ship's AI had been programmed to record everything during the cultural exchange mission, but the data had been encrypted with Maya's personal authorization codes. It took the Council's best technicians days to break through the security. What they found changed everything. The mission had started exactly as planned. The Harmony's Edge had entered Earth's solar system undetected and established a hidden observation post on the far side of Earth's moon. Maya's team of 8 cultural analysts had prepared for what they expected to be a routine study of primitive human society. Their target was Millbrook, Pennsylvania, a small town of approximately 8,000 humans. According to their intelligence, it was perfectly average, not too advanced, not too primitive, with a stable social structure that would allow for easy observation without interference. The first week's reports were textbook perfect. Analyst Jorik documented human agricultural practices. Specialist Nina recorded their basic social hierarchies. Engineer Tom studied their primitive transportation systems. Everything proceeded according to protocol. Then something unexpected happened. The integration begins day 8 of the mission showed the first deviation from standard procedure. Maya's team had been observing Millbrook from carefully concealed positions around the town, using advanced camouflage technology that rendered them invisible to human detection systems. But on that morning, a small human child had somehow walked directly up to analyst Jorik's position. The security footage showed a girl, perhaps 6 years old, with messy brown hair and grass stains on her clothes. She stood 3 feet away from Jorik's cloaked form and said, "Clear as daylight. I know you're there. Are you shy?" Jorik, trained for exactly this scenario, should have activated emergency protocols and retreated immediately. Instead, the footage showed him remaining perfectly still, apparently hoping the child would leave. She didn't. "My name is Emma," the girl continued, settling down cross-legged on the grass. "I was playing hide and seek, but Tommy and Sarah are really bad at finding people. Are you better at it?" Jorik still didn't move. Emma pulled something from her pocket, a small sandwich wrapped in colorful paper. "I brought extra lunch. Daddy says you should always share with visitors." That was when Jorik made his first mistake. His stomach growled. Loudly, Emma giggled. "Are you hungry, invisible person?" The child couldn't see him, but somehow she knew exactly where he was. She placed half the sandwich on the ground near his position and walked away, calling over her shoulder, "I'll come back tomorrow in case you want to play." The footage showed Jorik remaining motionless for another hour before finally picking up the sandwich. He examined it carefully with his scanner. Simple human food, bread, with a protein paste they called peanut butter and a sweet preserve made from fruit. Nothing harmful. He took a bite. Doctor Crix paused the footage. "This is where everything started to change," he reported to the emergency council session. "The human child had somehow detected our operative despite technology that should have made him completely undetectable." "How is that possible?" demanded Counselor Nexus. "We're still analyzing it, but initial reports suggest human children have enhanced pattern recognition abilities that their adults don't possess. They notice things that don't belong, even when they can't see them directly." "Continue the briefing," ordered Counselor Varix. The daily encounters the pattern repeated over the following days, but spread to other team members. Emma returned each morning to chat with Jorik, bringing food and asking questions. Soon she was joined by other children who had somehow intuited the presence of the hidden observers. Specialist Nina found herself regularly visited by a teenager named Marcus who would sit near her observation post and talk about his problems with school, his parents, and his dreams of becoming a veterinarian. He never looked directly at her, but somehow always faced the right direction when he spoke. Engineer Tom was adopted by an elderly man named Harold who claimed he was just feeding pigeons in the park, but always left a thermos of coffee and a chess piece in the exact spot where Tom was stationed. "It's unprecedented," Dr. Crix explained to the council. "Humans appear to have an intuitive understanding of presence that transcends visual confirmation. They were detecting our people through some combination of environmental awareness and social instinct." The footage showed Maya's team becoming increasingly fascinated by these interactions. Instead of maintaining professional distance, they began to look forward to their daily encounters with specific humans. More troubling, they began to respond. The first contact day 15 marked the mission's point of no return. Jorik, who had been listening to Emma's cheerful chatter for over a week, finally spoke. The girl had been telling him about her goldfish, which had apparently died that morning. She was crying, not the loud, dramatic tears that might be expected from a child, but quiet, heartbroken sobs that spoke of genuine grief. His name was Mr. Bubbles. Emma said to the empty air where she knew Jorik was hiding, he was really old, and Mommy said he lived a good life, but I just wanted to say goodbye properly. The footage showed Jorik's camouflage flickering as his emotional control wavered. Then, in clear violation of every first contact protocol, he deactivated his cloak entirely. Emma looked up at the tall, blue-scaled alien who had materialized beside her and said, "Oh, you're really pretty." "I'm sorry about Mr. Bubbles," Jorik replied in carefully practiced English. Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Did you have pets when you were little?" My people don't typically keep companion animals." "That's sad. Pets teach you how to love something even when it makes messes and costs money and might not live as long as you want them to." Jorik knelt down to Emma's eye level. "That sounds like a very important lesson. Want to help me bury him? I was going to do it alone, but it's better with friends." And so, the first official human-Zephyrian cultural exchange began with a 6-year-old girl and an alien diplomat holding a funeral for a goldfish in the backyard of a small American home. The cascade effect once Jorik revealed himself, the rest of the team quickly followed. The humans of Millbrook, rather than responding with fear or aggression as the mission planners had expected, welcomed their alien visitors with curiosity and hospitality that bordered on the absurd. Within hours, the entire team was integrated into the town's daily life. Specialist Nina found herself helping at the local animal shelter, her natural empathy and scientific knowledge making her invaluable in caring for injured wildlife. Engineer Tom was recruited by the town's struggling maintenance department, his advanced understanding of mechanical systems solving problems that had plagued the community for years. But it was the subtler integrations that proved most significant. Analyst Jorik began attending Emma's school, ostensibly to observe human educational systems, but increasingly to help with reading programs and science demonstrations. The children showed no fear of his alien appearance, treating him like an exotic but friendly teacher. Communications specialist Vera joined the town's volunteer fire department after helping to rescue a family from a house fire using her advanced medical training. The humans never questioned why an alien would risk her life for people she had just met. Cultural observer Thane became a regular at the local diner where his careful questions about human social customs evolved into genuine friendships with the regular customers who adopted him as their unofficial alien ambassador. Most significantly, Harold, the elderly man who had been leaving chess pieces for Engineer Tom, convinced the alien to join the town's weekly chess club. What began as cultural observation became intense philosophical discussions about strategy, sacrifice, and the nature of choice. These humans, Maya noted in her personal log, don't see our team as specimens to be studied or threats to be managed. They see them as individuals who have something to contribute to their community. It's unprecedented. The disaster 3 days before the mission was scheduled to end, disaster struck Millbrook. A late-season storm system brought torrential rains that overwhelmed the town's aging flood control systems. The small river that ran through the center of town became a raging torrent, threatening dozens of homes and the elementary school where nearly 200 children were trapped. The local emergency services were overwhelmed. The state authorities were hours away. Under normal circumstances, Maya would have ordered her team to observe the crisis without interference, maintaining their cover while documenting human disaster response procedures. Instead, she watched her team spring into action without waiting for orders. Jorik used his communications equipment to coordinate rescue efforts between separated emergency teams. Nina's medical training allowed her to triage injuries more effectively than the local paramedics. Tom's engineering expertise helped identify which buildings were structurally sound and which needed immediate evacuation. But it was the human's response that truly shocked Maya. She watched from her command post as the people of Millbrook organized themselves with incredible efficiency. Neighbors helped neighbors. Strangers risked their lives for each other. A group of teenagers formed a human chain to evacuate elderly residents from a nursing home. The local pastor opened his church as a shelter, and the hardware store owner handed out supplies without any expectation of payment. Most importantly, they worked alongside Maya's team as equals. There was no hesitation, no questions about jurisdiction or authority. When Specialist Vera organized a medical triage center in the high school gymnasium, the human doctors and nurses simply accepted her leadership because she was the most qualified person available. When engineer Tom designed a temporary dam using overturned cars and sandbags, the townspeople followed his instructions without question because his plan made sense. When analyst Jorik coordinated the evacuation of the elementary school, parents trusted him with their children's lives because he had proven himself to be someone who cared about those children. Maya recorded it all, her reports growing longer and more detailed as she tried to capture something that defied her training to quantify. The humans don't just cooperate, she noted. They transcend their individual limitations through collective action. But more than that, they extend this cooperation to anyone who demonstrates good faith regardless of species or origin. They judge based on actions, not appearance or authority. The choice when the floodwaters receded, Maya faced the most difficult decision of her career. The mission was scheduled to end in 48 hours. Protocol demanded that her team extract cleanly, leaving no trace of their presence. Their cover story would explain away any memories of alien contact as stress-induced hallucinations brought on by the disaster. But as she prepared to give the extraction order, she realized she couldn't. Her team wasn't just observing human culture anymore. They had become part of it. Jorik had promised to help Emma with her science fair project. Nina was scheduled to perform surgery on an injured hawk at the animal shelter. Tom was designing a new flood control system for the town council. Vera had agreed to train the local emergency medical technicians in advanced trauma care. Each member of her team had formed genuine connections, made commitments, found purposes that went beyond their original assignments. They weren't just doing their jobs anymore. They were living their lives. The final footage from Maya's personal log showed her sitting alone in the Harmony's edge, staring at the small wooden chess pawn that Harold had given her during their last game together. "You understand," she said to the recording device, "that I can't order them to leave. And more importantly, I can't ask them to pretend that what they've learned here doesn't matter." She paused, turning the pawn over in her hands. "Harold told me that this represents the most important piece on the board, not because it's powerful, but because it has the most potential. It can become anything if it reaches the other side." He said that's what makes humans dangerous to people like us. Not their weapons or their technology, but their belief that anyone can become anything. Maya looked directly into the camera. "My team has chosen to stay, not because they're abandoning their duties, but because they've found better ones. They're going to help these humans, and these humans are going to help them become more than they ever thought they could be." She set the pawn down on the table in front of her. "I'm returning to report what we learned, but I'm not going to lie about it. The humans aren't primitive. They're not dangerous. They're just more free than we are. And once you understand what that means, you can't go back to pretending you don't want it to." The recording ended with Maya standing alone on the bridge of her ship, looking back at Earth one final time before beginning her journey home. The evidence. The investigators reviewed thousands of hours of footage, documenting every interaction between Maya's team and the humans of Millbrook. What they found challenged every assumption the Galactic Council had made about human civilization. The humans had consistently demonstrated qualities that Zephyrian society claimed to value, but rarely practiced: genuine cooperation, selfless service, adaptability, and the ability to judge individuals based on their actions rather than their origins. More disturbing, Maya's team had thrived under these conditions in ways that suggested Zephyrian society might be fundamentally limited in its approach to individual development. The evidence is clear, Dr. Crix reported to the emergency council session. Maya's team didn't desert or suffer psychological breakdown. They experienced psychological growth. They discovered capabilities and purposes that their original social roles would never have allowed them to develop. You're suggesting that human culture is somehow superior to our own? Counselor Nexus asked sharply. I'm suggesting that human culture might be more effective at maximizing individual potential, which raises uncomfortable questions about whether our culture is doing the same. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Counselor Varix finally spoke. What does Maya expect us to do with this information? Dr. Crix looked at his notes. According to her preliminary statements, she expects us to learn from it. She believes that contact with humanity could help us become better versions of ourselves. And if we don't want to change, Dr. Crix met the counselor's gaze. Then she believes we're choosing to limit ourselves out of fear. And eventually that choice will make us irrelevant. As the session ended, the council members filed out in troubled silence, each wondering whether Maya Chun had brought back a gift or a weapon from her time among the humans. The answer, they were beginning to realize, might depend entirely on how afraid they were of becoming something more than they already were. The truth and its consequences the breaking 0.6 weeks after Maya's return, the situation on Station Nexus 7 had deteriorated beyond what the Galactic Council had thought possible. What started as one uncooperative officer had evolved into something approaching a cultural revolution. The chess piece, which scientists had studied exhaustively without finding anything remotely dangerous, had somehow become a symbol. Maya had begun teaching the game to anyone who would listen, and the lessons went far beyond moving pieces on a board. Chess is about seeing possibilities, Maya explained to a group of young Zephyrians who had gathered in the station's recreation area. Every piece has potential you might not see at first glance. A pawn can become a queen. A defensive move can set up a winning attack. The key is understanding that the game is never really about the pieces you have, but about how you choose to use them. Station Commander Roth watched this gathering from the security office with growing alarm. She's not teaching them a game, he reported to the council. She's teaching them to question the system that assigns their roles. Half my staff is now asking why they can't transfer to different departments, why they can't pursue education outside their specializations, why their career paths were decided before they were even adults. The problem was spreading beyond the station. Reports were coming in from across Zephyrian space of individuals requesting reassignments, questioning traditional hierarchies, and expressing interest in human philosophy. Several colony worlds had reported organized discussions about individual choice and personal fulfillment, concepts that had barely existed in Zephyrian vocabulary before Maya's return. Most disturbing of all, productivity hadn't decreased. If anything, many departments were reporting increased efficiency as workers found ways to pursue their interests within their assigned roles, bringing creativity and enthusiasm to tasks they had previously performed by rote. The council faced an unprecedented crisis, their culture was changing, and the change was making people happier. The final interrogation counselor Varix decided to make one last attempt to contain the situation. He ordered Maya brought to the council chambers for a formal hearing with the full governing body present and the session recorded for posterity. Maya entered the chamber wearing her standard uniform, but the chess pawn was visible in her breast pocket. She moved with a confidence that seemed alien to her observers, not the rigid posture of military discipline, but the relaxed assurance of someone who had found their place in the world. Commander Chun, Varix began formally, you stand accused of insubordination, cultural contamination, and inciting civil unrest. How do you answer these charges? Maya looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of the 47 council members who had gathered to judge her. I answer that you're asking the wrong questions. The charges are quite specific. The charges are irrelevant, Maya interrupted, her voice calm but firm. You want to know what happened on Earth. You want to know why my team chose to stay. You want to know why I've been teaching chess and sharing human philosophy? But you're not asking the question that actually matters. Counselor Nexus leaned forward. And what question is that? Whether we've been living up to our potential as a species or whether we've been settling for security over growth. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Varix called for order. You will answer the charges as stated, he demanded. Maya pulled the chess pawn from her pocket and placed it on the podium in front of her. This belonged to Harold Martinez, a 90-year-old human who spent his retirement teaching chess to children in a small library. He had been a factory worker for 40 years, doing the same job every day, because that's what was expected of him. But when he retired, he discovered he had a gift for teaching, for helping young minds understand strategy and patience, and the beauty of seeing several moves ahead. She paused, looking around the chamber. Harold told me something that changed how I see everything. He said, Maya, the tragedy isn't that I worked in a factory for 40 years. The tragedy is that I waited 40 years to discover what I was really meant to do. The truth revealed the humans we observed. Maya continued, her voice gaining strength, live in a society that's far from perfect. They have poverty, conflict, inefficiency, and countless problems we've solved in our civilization. But they have something we've lost, the belief that individuals can grow beyond their circumstances. Counselor Nexus interrupted. Our system provides stability, security, and optimal resource allocation. Every citizen has a role that matches their abilities. Every citizen has a role that matches their aptitude tests at age 12, Maya corrected. But abilities change. People grow. Dreams evolve. And when you lock someone into a path before they've had a chance to discover who they really are, you don't create stability, you create stagnation. She gestured toward the chess piece. Harold could have lived his entire life never knowing he was a gifted teacher. In our society, he would have, his aptitude tests would have identified him as suitable for manufacturing, and that would have been the end of his story. But humans believe in second chances, career changes, personal reinvention. They believe people can become more than they started as. Dr. Crix, who had been observing from the side of the chamber, stepped forward. Maya, you're describing chaos. Without structured role assignment, how does their society function? Maya smiled. Better than you'd think. When people choose their paths, they bring passion to their work. When they feel valued for their contributions rather than their compliance, they innovate. When they believe they can change their circumstances, they take responsibility for improving them. She picked up the chess pawn again. My team didn't abandon their duties. They discovered what their duties could be when they were free to choose them. Jorik wasn't just a cultural analyst, he was a gifted educator who found purpose in helping children learn. Nina wasn't just a specialist, she was a healer who could save lives. Tom wasn't just an engineer, he was a problem solver who could improve an entire community's quality of life. The demonstration, you want proof? Maya asked, addressing the chamber directly. Let me show you what human thinking looks like. Without waiting for permission, she activated her personal communicator and projected a holographic chessboard in the center of the chamber. This is a puzzle Harold taught me, she announced. White to move and mate in 3. According to standard strategy guides, this position is hopeless for white. Any logical analysis would conclude that white should resign. The council members studied the board. Several were skilled strategists, and they quickly confirmed Maya's assessment. White was clearly losing. But humans don't just accept what the rules tell them is possible, Maya said. They look for creative solutions. She made a move that seemed to put White in an even worse position. This move appears to be a mistake, she explained. It sacrifices material and exposes the king to attack. But watch what happens when you think beyond the immediate consequences. Maya demonstrated the sequence. Black's forced responses led to an elegant checkmate that none of the council members had seen coming. This is what human culture does, Maya said quietly. It teaches you to see possibilities that conventional wisdom says don't exist. It encourages you to sacrifice short-term security for long-term growth. It values creativity over compliance. Counselor Varix stared at the board. This is just a game, Commander. No, Maya replied. This is a way of thinking. And once you learn to think this way, you can't go back to accepting limitations that don't have to exist. The confession Maya took a deep breath and looked directly at the recording cameras. I need to tell you all something that the Council doesn't want you to hear. The humans aren't primitive. They're not dangerous in the way we thought. They're dangerous because they've solved a problem we didn't even know we had. She paused, choosing her words carefully. They've figured out how to build a society that grows people instead of managing them. They've learned to see individuals as sources of potential rather than sources of risk. And once you experience that, once you feel what it's like to be valued for who you could become rather than constrained by who you've always been, you can't pretend it doesn't matter. The chamber was absolutely silent. My team chose to stay on Earth because they discovered versions of themselves they never knew existed. They found purposes that fulfilled them in ways their assigned roles never could. They experienced what it means to be part of a community that encourages growth rather than demanding conformity. Maya picked up the chess pawn one final time. Harold gave me this on my last day in Millbrook. He said it represented the most important lesson humans had learned, that anyone can become anything if they're willing to make the journey. He said that was why humans would eventually reach the stars, not because they had better technology or stronger weapons, but because they refused to accept that things had to stay the way they always were. The warning, the Council thinks it can contain this by isolating Earth, Maya continued. They think they can prevent human ideas from spreading by declaring the planet off limits. But it's too late for that. She gestured toward the recording equipment. This conversation is being broadcast across every Zephyrian world. Thousands of people are hearing about humans for the first time, learning that there are other ways to organize society, other ways to live. And once that knowledge exists, you can't make it disappear. Counselor Nexus stood abruptly. You're advocating for the destruction of our civilization. I'm advocating for its evolution, Maya replied calmly. Humans didn't become successful by abandoning everything they valued. They became successful by keeping what worked and changing what didn't. They learned to balance stability with growth, community with individuality, tradition with innovation. She looked around the chamber. We could learn from them. We could become a society that develops people's potential instead of limiting it. We could create a culture where everyone has the chance to discover what they're truly capable of, but only if we're willing to admit that the way we've always done things might not be the best way. The vote what followed was the most contentious debate in Zephyrian political history. The council members argued for hours about the implications of Maya's revelations, the threat posed by human culture, and the appropriate response to the growing unrest across their civilization. Some demanded that Maya be imprisoned and Earth quarantined permanently. Others suggested that limited cultural exchange might be beneficial. A few, influenced by Maya's words, wondered aloud whether fundamental changes to Zephyrian society might be necessary. The final vote was closer than anyone had expected, 24 to 23 in favor of maintaining the Earth quarantine and suppressing human cultural influences, but the narrow margin revealed how deeply Maya's message had penetrated even the highest levels of government. Counselor Varix announced the decision with obvious reluctance. Commander Chen, you are hereby relieved of duty and confined to quarters pending psychological evaluation. Earth will remain classified as a restricted zone, and any discussion of human cultural practices is forbidden in all official capacities. Maya nodded calmly. You can restrict official discussion, she said, but you can't change what people have heard, and you can't stop them from thinking about it. The ripple effect in the weeks that followed, the Council's attempts to suppress interest in human culture only intensified it. The recording of Maya's testimony, despite being officially classified, spread through unofficial channels across the galaxy. Discussion groups formed in secret. Chess sets appeared in markets across dozens of worlds. Young Zephyrians began asking uncomfortable questions about career flexibility and personal choice. Maya, confined to her quarters, received a constant stream of visitors, colleagues, friends, and strangers who wanted to hear more about the humans she had lived among. Each conversation planted new seeds of curiosity and dissatisfaction with the status quo. The chess piece remained on her desk, a small wooden symbol of a much larger revolution in thinking. The return 6 months after the council vote, Maya received an unexpected message. It came through official diplomatic channels, but the content was unlike anything in the archives of interstellar communication. Dear Maya, the message began, "This is Emma. I'm 7 now, and I lost another tooth last week. Jorik helped me write this message using the big radio at the college. He says you might be in trouble for helping us, and that makes me sad, because you're really nice and you taught me that chess pawn thing about becoming anything you want to be." The message continued with the cheerful rambling of a child, but embedded within it was something more significant. Emma described the changes in Millbrook since Maya's team had stayed. Jorik was now officially the town's educational coordinator, developing new teaching methods that were being studied by universities across the country. Nina had established a wildlife rehabilitation center that was saving hundreds of animals each year. Tom's engineering innovations had not only solved the flood problem, but had attracted attention from environmental agencies worldwide. "They're not hiding anymore," Emma explained. "The government people came and talked to them, and everybody agreed that having alien friends was pretty cool as long as they didn't hurt anybody, which they would never do because they're too nice." The message ended with an invitation that made Maya's breath catch. "Harold says to tell you that the chess club misses you, and there's always a chair waiting if you want to come back. He also says to tell your people that humans are pretty good at figuring things out together if they want to try." The choice Maya read the message 3 times before she fully understood its implications. Earth wasn't just offering asylum to her team, it was offering cooperation to her entire civilization. The humans had not only accepted alien contact, but were extending an invitation for cultural exchange on an equal basis. She looked around her small quarters, then at the chess pawn that had started everything. 2 days later, Maya submitted a formal request to the council. She wanted to return to Earth, not as a covert observer, but as an official ambassador. She wanted to establish formal diplomatic relations between humanity and the Zephyrian Confederation. She wanted to build bridges between two species that could learn from each other. The council denied her request immediately, but they couldn't deny the growing number of similar requests from other Zephyrians who had heard her story and wanted to experience human culture for themselves. They couldn't stop the informal chess clubs that were spreading across their civilization. They couldn't prevent young Zephyrians from questioning why their life paths were chosen for them before they were old enough to know who they wanted to become. The new game 1 year after Maya's return from Earth, she was released from confinement and reassigned to a minor administrative position in the station's cultural archives. It was meant to be a punishment, a dead-end job that would keep her away from impressionable minds. Instead, Maya turned it into an opportunity. She began documenting everything she had learned about human culture, creating detailed records that would survive any attempt at suppression. She established a small library in a forgotten section of the archives where people could come to read about Earth and discuss what they had learned. Most importantly, she continued teaching chess. The games drew small crowds at first, curious individuals who had heard about the human strategy game and wanted to understand what made it special. But as word spread, the gatherings grew larger. People came not just to learn the rules, but to discuss the philosophy behind them. "Chess teaches you that change is possible," Maya would explain to newcomers. "Every game starts with the same setup, but no 2 games are ever identical. The outcome depends on the choices you make, not the hand you were dealt." She would hold up the wooden pawn, and this piece, the one that seems weakest and most limited, has the greatest potential for transformation. It can become anything the player needs it to be, if they're willing to invest the time and take the risks necessary to get it across the board. The legacy. Maya never returned to Earth, but she never stopped working toward the day when others could make that journey freely. Her chess library became a quiet center of cultural revolution, where Zephyrians learned to imagine different possibilities for their lives and their society. The council maintained its quarantine of Earth, but the ideas Maya had brought back continued to spread. Young Zephyrians began demanding more flexible career paths. Scientists started pursuing research interests beyond their assigned specializations. Artists created works that challenged traditional forms and subjects. The changes were gradual but persistent, like water slowly wearing away stone. 20 years later, when the first official human diplomatic mission reached Zephyrian space, they were greeted by a civilization that had quietly transformed itself. The rigid caste system still existed officially, but it had developed flexibility that allowed individuals to grow beyond their original assignments. The emphasis on security over growth had given way to a more balanced approach that valued both stability and innovation. And in a small library on Station Nexus 7, an elderly Maya Chen taught chess to her great-niece, passing on the wooden pawn that had started it all. Remember, she told the young girl as she explained how pawns could become queens, the most important lesson humans taught us isn't about any particular game or strategy. It's about believing that people can become more than they start as. Once you believe that, everything else becomes possible. The great niece, whose generation had grown up hearing stories about the magical planet called Earth where people could choose their own destinies, nodded solemnly and made her first move. Outside the library windows, ships prepared for departure to dozens of worlds across the galaxy. And in the cargo hold of one vessel, hidden among official supplies, was a small crate containing chess sets and instruction manuals, gifts from humans who had learned that some revolutions begin not with weapons or manifestos, but with simple wooden pieces and the radical idea that anyone can become anything they choose to be. The game, as Harold would have said, was just beginning.